Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to West Philippine Sea and the fish on our tables, a multi-stakeholder roundtable on the implications of IUU fishing in the West Philippine Sea for Philippine food security. I am Jules Giyang, Rappler's Head of Community.
And my name is Happy Ferrarin from Rappler Plus. I'll be joining Jules here to host this day's webinar. Today we are also doing this in observance of the World Food Day 2021, and we will be asking questions and finding the answers to questions like, what does the West Philippine Sea issue mean for everyday Filipinos? How does this impact food security? Is this a gut issue? And how does this connect to the West Philippine Sea? We'll also hear what the situation is like for our local fisher folk who are situated near the West Philippine Sea. So these are the fisher folk communities. We will be hearing from them later on. So these are some of the questions that we will tackle this afternoon. But right now, I know you're hearing a lot of terms that may not be familiar to you. So don't worry. As I said, we are here to learn together. So Jules, I want to ask, just so we're clear on definition of terms, what does IUU mean? Ano bang ibig sabihin ng IUU?
Ano nga ba yan? Tama yan, Happy. May mga new words tayo naririnig ngayon. And for sure, marami rin ang nagtatanong tungkol sa mga terms na yan. Ayon sa Food and Agriculture Organization ng United Nations o FAO, ang IUU o Illegal, Unreported, and Unregulated Fishing ay patungkol sa iba't ibang aspeto ng maling paghuli sa mga isda. Dagdag pa nga ng FAO, and I quote, IUU fishing undermines national and regional efforts to conserve and manage fish stocks. Okay? Sabi pa dito, IUU fishing greatly disadvantages and discriminates against those fishers that act responsibly, honestly, and in accordance with the terms of their fishing authorization. So, in top line, Happy, yun yung kailangan natin malaman patungkol sa IUU. Pero Happy, may another question tayo dito. How much marine and inland resources does the Philippines have, and how much do they contribute to the country's GDP?
Okay, so punta naman tayo sa numbers. Let's take a look at the numbers of what we're talking about today. So here's what you need to know about the Philippines fisheries sector. So the total territorial water area, including the exclusive economic zone, spans across 2,200,000 square kilometers, while the length of the Philippine coastline extends to 17,460 kilometers. So ayan, nakikita po natin, malaki ito. And I invite you all to remember kasi baka later on meron tayong pop quiz about this.
Okay, syempre aside from that, no, in 2019 naman, Happy, the volume of fisheries production measured at 4.415 million metric tons. And of this total, 53.42% came from aquaculture. Tas 25.49% naman galing naman sa municipal fisheries, and 21.10% ay galing naman sa commercial fisheries. So yan yung mga numbers na dapat natin tandaan.
Okay. So meron pa. Stick with us. The West Philippine Sea produces an annual fish yield of 300,000 metric tons, accounting for 7% of the country's total fish production. So imagine all the fish production that we have, 7% nun galing sa West Philippine Sea, amounting to 300,000 metric tons.
Ang dami pala nun. Tandaan natin yan, 7% of the country's total fish production galing sa the West Philippine Sea. Ito pa. Okay, with the country's many marine and inland resources, the fisheries industry contributes 1.3% to the country's total GDP. So ito naman yung pang-ekonomiya. Ganyan ang ambag, 'di ba, ng fisheries sa GDP natin, 1.3%. Okay, last trivia natin, Happy.
Okay, so we want to know what does this mean? What do these numbers mean? So today, we want to learn about what are the implications naman of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing in the West Philippine Sea. So the illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, are they threats to our, all of these numbers that we've been talking about so far, like how it contributes to the economy, to fish production, and just our waters, kasi ang daming square kilometers nun.
Correct.
So
okay. Yes, Happy. Kaya naman ngayon, ang question natin ngayon, paano nga ba natin to maitatahi sa food security? Paano ba natin to gagawing gut issue para malapit sa lahat ng mga kababayan natin? Sa seguridad, gaya ng nabanggit mo, at syempre doon na rin sa kalayaan ng ating mga mangingisda. Kaya ngayong hapon po, magiging makabuluhan ang ating pag-uusapan dahil magkakaroon tayo ng multi-stakeholder roundtable. Okay? So without further ado, let's now do a quick rundown, Happy, of what to expect for this program.
Okay, so here's what we can expect. First, we are going to hear some messages of support from our partners, and then we will proceed to our keynote presentation that will really talk about IUU. So in the keynote presentation, that's where we can learn about IUU and its impact on fishing and food security in the West Philippine Sea. And then we will also hear directly from our communities. We will hear stories from them about the challenges and what they face on an everyday, what their situation is like every day. So that's direct from our communities about the impacts that they face because of IUU fishing.
Tama. And pagkatapos po niyan, diretso na po tayo sa ating roundtable discussion together with several panelists kung saan hihimayin natin yung topic ngayong hapon. And for our friends here on Zoom, pwede kayong magtanong sa ating mga panelists by placing your questions in a Q&A box pagkatapos ng ating roundtable. And of course, we are now live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and other platforms. So to our Zoom participants in our live stream, pwede nyo pong gamitin ang ating hashtags. Kung gusto niyo mag-share ng inyong mga takeaways, our official hashtags are hashtag #OurFishOurLife and hashtag #ThisIsTheLife.
Ayan. Favorite ko talaga yan. This is the life.
Nagugutom tuloy ako. Gusto ko ng isda.
This is the life. All right. So to formally start our program, may we call in the Chief of Party of Fish Right? Let's welcome Mr. Nigel Armada. Welcome, Nigel.
Thank you, Happy and Jules. Mayong hapon from Iloilo. Yeah, Mr. Sean Callahan, Acting Mission Director of USAID Philippines. Rear Admiral Roy Echeverria, Director of the National Coast Watch Center. Distinguished discussants for today's roundtable discussion. Colleagues, friends, and our viewers out there, good afternoon. Today's event is actually part of a series of roundtable discussions that Fish Right program started in early 2019. We call it the Philippines Journey to Sustainable Fisheries to ensure food security. We have engaging many marine scientists, economists, government officials, and non-government organizations, as well as media practitioners. We discuss ways to ensure the sustainability of our fisheries. From highlighting the importance of marine protected areas and marine protected area networks, to exchanging ideas on what needs to be done for the fisheries to not just recover from it, but better recover from it after the pandemic, to discussing how to address illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, and most recently, to initiating conversations on the significance of West Philippine Sea to the country's fisheries. This was during the special session of the Philippine Association of Marine Science held in last July. The importance of West Philippine Sea to the country's fisheries and our food security cannot be overemphasized. Consider this. Some of these were already discussed by Jules and Happy earlier. The waters west of Palawan are very productive and thus a major fishing ground, not just of our country, but of others as well. From 1993 to 1997, when statistics was still with BIFAR, the West Palawan waters recorded the highest volume of commercial fisheries, contributing to about 17 to 20% to the total marine capture fisheries. The Calayan Island Group alone can potentially contribute to as much as 5% to our total marine capture fisheries production. That's just the Calayan Island Group alone. The West Philippine Sea is a source of livelihood for several hundreds of thousands of Filipinos. And this is not yet talking about connectivity, the influence of West Philippine Sea as sources of eggs, larvae, and propagules to seed the inner parts of our country, like the Sulu Sea and others, the Manila Bay, and so on, as well as outside the country, like other parts of the South China Sea. We can go on and on to cite other studies. But today, our journey continues. We all meet today to better understand the value of West Philippine Sea, not only to our food security, but also to our economic activities. We look forward to a productive discussion to enlighten us how we ensure that we have enough fish to sustain us and the next generation. So allow me to thank the Bureau, the BFAR, our partners, the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, and the United States Agency for International Development for their unwavering support to our project. We also thank all our partners present here today, and Rappler, of course, for taking up this challenge and making this event possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much to you, Nigel Armada, for that opening remarks. And at this point, let's now listen to a message of support from the Acting Mission Director of USAID Philippines, Pacific Islands, and Mongolia. Let's welcome Sean Callahan. Sean, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sir Nigel, for introducing everything. I'd like to first acknowledge the Philippine Coast Guard and the Rear Admiral at the National Coast Watch Center, our academia, professors, marine biologists from across the Philippines, the NGO sector, civil society, students, members of the media, Rappler, and most importantly, the fisher folk. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak a few words as we learn a lot today. I am very honored to be here today with all of you to join you in this roundtable discussion on IUU in the West Philippine Sea and its implications on Philippine food security. My name is Sean Callahan, and I represent the United States Agency for International Development, also known as USAID. USAID is the lead US government agency for international development and humanitarian assistance. This year, USAID is proud to celebrate 60 years of helping communities around the world. It was founded in 1961 by President John F. Kennedy, and the Philippines was one of our very first partner countries. Today, USAID works in more than 100 countries worldwide, but here the Philippines remains a strong and key partner in promoting sustainable and inclusive development. For the past 6 decades, we have collaborated with the Philippines government, private sector, local organizations to improve everyday lives, investing more than $5.1 billion towards shared development goals. Many thanks to Rappler and USAID Fish Right Program for bringing everyone together from fisher folk groups, civil society organizations, to help to discuss their experiences and provide insights on this topic of great relevance in these times of uncertainty, especially today on the eve of World Food Day, and as we all face the crisis of climate change. For more than 2 decades, USAID has been working very closely with the Philippines government and civil society to promote sustainable and climate resilient fisheries and spotlight the importance of science, technology, and innovation in protecting Philippine fisheries, addressing IUU fishing. As we all know, the ocean is a vital source of jobs and food for the Philippines. And with a state with more water than land and where fisheries represents an important economic sector, we cannot ignore this issue. Fish make up more than 50% of the protein in the Filipino diet, and the fishing industry employs more than 1 million Filipinos. IUU fishing has had a harmful impact on fisheries productivity, has endangered the food security and the socioeconomic stability of fishing communities across this country. As we all know, the West Philippine Sea is a relevant backdrop for this discussion. This rich and biodiverse area makes up 1/3 of the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, EEZ, and contributes as much as 27% of domestic fish. It is a priority region for conservation for the Philippines government, but it faces grave challenges associated with overfishing and IUU fishing. Any type of illegal and unsustainable activity, destructive and uncontrolled harvesting of giant clams, land reclamation and island building, poaching, and many more activities will have a severe impact on the daily lives of fisher folk and their families. And we will hear some of these stories today. And these stories are shared by roughly 600,000 Filipino small-scale fisher folk who use the West Philippine Sea as their fishing grounds. The impact of IUU on food availability and income has had a knock-on effect on seafood supply chains in the entire fishing industry. Because the West Philippine Sea is ecologically connected to productive adjacencies as well, and puts the WPS at risk, it will endanger the entire Philippines fishery sector. Through the Fishery Program, USAID supports the sustainable use of key fisheries and marine resources across the Philippines to benefit up to 3 million people in coastal communities. And we do know that COVID-19 has had a severe impact on seafood demand, supply chains, fishing activities globally. The 2021 State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World report estimates that the disruptions from COVID-19, combined with conflict and climate-related disasters in many parts of the world, has caused about 160 million people to go hungry in the past year, more so than in 2019. In the Philippines, the May 2021 hunger rate doubled since the December 2019, and has doubled the December 2019 pre-pandemic levels of 8.8%, which means that more than 2 million families have gone hungry. The US government through USAID is committed to helping the Philippine government secure for all Filipinos a safe, stable, sustainable, and resilient seafood supply and economic growth through the protection of these critical marine and fishery resources. And as we address the challenges brought on by COVID-19, the Fishery Program has developed an online marketplace called Fish Tiangi to help Filipino fisher folks sell their produce and to provide customers access to high quality, responsibly fished seafood at affordable prices, while ensuring that conservation measures were not compromised. And despite these challenges value fishing, I look forward with great optimism to see a sustainable and bright future of Philippines fisheries with a robust civil society sector as a strategic partner of the Philippines government. Our two countries share an enduring collaboration in sustainable fisheries and marine biodiversity conservation that is built on our shared goals and 60 years of USAID partnerships. And I'm confident that we will achieve great results that will benefit everyone, but especially our fishing community partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan, for your message of support. I also just want to point out we have a really nice mix of people from all over the Philippines who are joining us right now from in our Zoom room. So hello to everyone. I can see you. People saying they're from Laguna, Batangas, Cabanatuan, Cebu, also in Singapore, Filipinos in Singapore. So this is really a spread from Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, people joining us from different backgrounds. We have advocates, educators, and students as well. So this looks like this is really something that a lot of Filipinos are very much interested in, and this is an issue that unites all of us in the Philippines. So thank you, Mr. Callahan, for that. And we will proceed to the meat of our learning session for today. We will go with our keynote presentation right now. So at this point, let's now focus on the IUU fishing and food security in the West Philippine Sea. And to lead this portion, let's welcome a professor from the Biology Department, College of Science, De La Salle University. Let's welcome in the Zoom room, Dr. Carmen Ablan Lagman, or Dr. Menchi. Hello, Dr. Menchi. Welcome.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, we'll wait for you to set up.
I'm sharing my screen.
Yes.
Yeah. Right, good afternoon. And I would like to thank the Rappler for the opportunity to sit here kasama ninyo, tsaka si Sir Nigel. Matagal na kami magkaibigan ni Sir Nigel, for inviting. I would like to speak about the converging on the fisheries in the West Philippine Seas, looking at our fisheries in Palawan in a larger context of the regional fisheries. Okay, so ito yung area na pinag-uusapan natin. This is the South China Sea, of which the West Philippine Sea is a part, and you have all the other countries around this area with their different names all there on the picture. This area is actually very important because of the 180 million people in coastal areas that depend on this fish. And we have tons of fish worth USD, 22 billion in this place, and it's landed annually. We have about 66.7 billion total economic activity that is dependent on fisheries from around this region. And there is 3.37 trillion in cargo, 172 million fishing vessels, and 5.4 million Filipinos employed in these vessels, many of whom are actually our Filipino overseas seafarers. So yung Philippine Sea natin is really part of this larger, bigger picture. Just to put it in context, if we look at how much we Filipinos and our other regional counterparts depend on fish compared to people in, let's say, Australia, Brazil, Germany, UK, and the US, yung graph na to will show you that ang laki talaga ng dependence natin sa fish. Very much, almost not three times, if not twice, how much fish we actually eat and use as protein for our consumption. So the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea is perhaps the single most international convention or law that has affected fisheries in the different countries around this area. See, we've talked about the exclusive economic zones, which are now part of each of these countries, drawn in those different colors in that area. No? And if you would see UNCLOS, which started around here, has actually affected how much fish people were getting now from these areas. Of course, there was an increase in demand, but now with that kind of a policy, yung investments that we put into that area becomes practically returns sa atin din. Kasi nga, meron na tayong jurisdiction over those areas. The Philippines, if you would look at, Dr. Nigel has mentioned earlier just how much fish we actually sell and consume. We are here on the top of the 25 major areas in production. So Philippines is here, right? And so are many other countries around us in that region: Indonesia, China, Vietnam, Malaysia. Yeah, they're all listed in here. So we're talking about this, the fishers and the fish. But if you were the fish, what do you actually see? Do you see those numbers? Do you see those lines? I don't think so. Fish will see us over here and the area in which they're playing or moving around, they're reproducing, and they're being caught without any knowledge of any of those lines that I've actually shown you earlier. In 81, I think, when we had the Coral Reef Symposium in the Philippines, there was a suggestion by Dr. John McManus that this area over here, given its by geography, will be producing this tiny little larvae and corals that were seeding this area. Kasi, that's my first point, habitats are crucial for fish to reproduce. And our seagrass, mangroves, and coral reefs are all necessary for the fish to produce their eggs, para magkaroon sila ng baby, para magkaroon sila ng meeting ground, para mag-mate sila. And those larvae can actually be seeding the area. Yung theory na yan, we started trying to figure out kung tama nga siya. Yung idea na yan. By working with different people in the region, if you would see the paper, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, nagsama-sama kami to try and figure this out. And what we found out was that the fish in these areas, if you see my lines, are not following what we will call the boundaries that we've drawn earlier. And every country is within one of the many lines, and every line and area is populated or kasama dyan ang more than one country. 10 years later, or 20 years later, nagkakita kami ulit. And we have our students studying with different students. But this is also another study separate from us. And ganun din na nakita nila. Kita niyo iba-ibang colors. Those colors are where different fish of similar, genetic heritage or background actually belong. And you could see that they are moving around in areas bigger than the lines that we actually draw. What does that do with IUU fishing? These are the habitats that the fish depend on, and we can be destroying them through use of for our own consumption and even from land reclamation. And that will devastate where the fish larvae will be coming from. And that is very important because secondly, yung marine fish natin production is medyo nagdelikado na. Kita niyo yung kulay orange na to. This is marine fisheries production globally, and it's actually plateauing. Can you see that? Medyo flat na siya. So marine fisheries production is declining, it's already plateaued. Why I say declining and is because the quality of the fish itself is actually changing. So we have dati malalaki yung fish na nanganganak na, yung malalaking groupers, diba? Malalaking pampano. Yung quality ng mga fish natin ay nagbabago na at hindi yata yung mga matatanda ang magsasabi sa atin. But there are some areas in the Philippines where still have very big tuna, yung mga ganun kalalaking fish. Marami pa rin. And what is sad is like yung groupers, yung lapu-lapu dito sa kanan baba, malalaki yan, di ba? Mga 1 kilo isa, pwede yan. But now what we're getting is less of these and more of the fish that actually are of lower quality in terms of the food chain, di ba? Yung lapu-lapu nasa taas Mas mababa yung kind or quality ng fish na kukuha natin. And even from the commercial fishing, we also actually have lower quality fish. Now, my third point will be related to this IUU. Yung IUU fishing and its control as defined by the video we showed earlier, diba? Illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing is beyond the resources of any one state. Those policies are meant to help us maintain the fisheries para maging continuous ang supply nila. Kasi parang ginto yan Ginto na hindi nauubos, diba? Kasi if we maintain our fish properly, we will always have fish for the future, unlike other resources that we may find in this area. So IUU fishing and its control is beyond the resources of any one state, and that is why we will need help. So one other thing that we've seen in our studies is that if you look at the different countries dito, no, Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, I was just putting here the policies that will cause somebody to be called an IUU fisher, diba? Bakit bawal? You're not in the right fishing zone, you're using an improper gear, or you are fishing on the wrong season. But if you look at policies across, kasi diba remember yung fish natin is going beyond the lines of country boundaries. However, the policies dito pa lang, zones pa lang, iba-iba na yung tawag natin. And if you read, sorry, maliit lang to, if you read more finely, even the quality of the gear and when and where the open-close seasons are will be very different across these different countries. And therefore, how can we maintain and make sure that the fish which we are depending on will always be there over time? So confounded by things like marine pollution, which has been already mentioned earlier, the devastation of the oil spills, and the change and destruction that is due to rising temperatures, I hope I have convinced you at this point that the fish need help. The fish need the regulation to make sure they will be there for us in the future. We have problems because these fish don't have visas and passports. However, we have all these policies that seem to be very different across different countries. So rather than using the UNCLOS as a way to define those lines and say, this is what I have and this is how I'm going to keep it, siguro dapat we can find a way to use the UNCLOS to actually push for regional cooperation and having uniform rules without the discussion on who owns what initially. Kasi naman at the end, these things are actually staying in one area, but are not staying in one area at hindi siya mauubos, but it actually is moving around the bigger picture. We have international laws that support regional fisheries management, and I've just listed here a few: the Convention on Biodiversity, Code of Conduct for Fisheries, Fish Stocks, Migrating Stocks, and the World Summit for Sustainable Development. On the other hand, we also have our own laws in the Philippines that will actually command us, if not demand us, to make sure our fish will be there for the future and for our, fish is life. So I would just like to leave us with this. Let's use UNCLOS to address the problem of IUU fishing and save the fish, our fishers, kasi nga yung fish, hindi naman natin pwedeng sabihin our fish The fish and our fishers establish transboundary areas management for protection and agree on the rules that will be considered for declaring something as IUU fishing. Bring into the discussion other international policy instruments and help develop regional policies targeted towards small scale fishers. Kasi sila naman talaga yung most important na gumagamit at harvest ng mga fish na to. So fish, I'd like to leave us with that idea that fish is an inexhaustible resource if we act now. They are moving around an area larger than our boundaries, and that we need concerted efforts at this time because talagang nagdedelikado na ang ating fisheries. I hope that helps, Sir Nigel. I'm going back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Menchi, for that very interesting talk. Happy may takeaways agad akong nakuha dito. No? Number one, na may conflicting policies talaga na nag-exist sa iba't ibang mga states within the region. And then yung mga threats to this portion of what we're talking about, yung marine pollution and even climate change. So nandun yung mga man-made na mga pollution and of course yung climate change mismo. At pinaka gusto ko yung sinabi ni Dr. Menchi na yung UNCLOS dapat magamit natin to for regional cooperation kasi yung mga isda nga naman talaga hindi naman nila alam yung mga boundaries na to, di ba? So dapat magamit natin siya for cooperation. Okay, so muli po, thank you so much to Dr. Menchi Ablanlagman. Maraming salamat po. And at this point, Happy, pag-uusapan naman natin yung mga hamon ng IUU at ang impact, IUU fishing at ang impact nito sa ating mga komunidad. Happy, sino bang makakasama natin for this portion?
Okay, so makakasama natin ang president ng Masinloc Fishermen na si Leonardo Quaresma at ang president ng People's Development Institute, si Ria Teves. So hello, Leonardo at Ria.
Magandang hapon po.
Hello, magandang hapon.
Welcome po dito sa ating usapan.
Okay, Leonardo, paano po? Pa-unmute po ng ating Zoom. Okay, ayan, magandang hapon po. Ayan po, magandang hapon po. Simulan po natin sa inyo, Leonardo. Pakilala niyo po yung mga ginagawa ninyo at kamusta po yung sitwasyon dyan sa Masinloc?
Ako po si Mr. Leonardo na Federate po ng Masinloc. At kasalukuyan po ay ito po yung mga pangyayari na nagaganap po dito sa aming pangisda.
Okay, babalikan natin mamaya si Leonardo. Sige po. Okay po, babalikan na lang natin. Happy mamaya si Leonardo. Subukan natin makakuha ng mas strong na internet connection. Okay, so now let's proceed, Happy, to our other speaker for this portion.
Yes, let's hear from you, Ms. Ria. Can you tell us a little bit about the situation sa mga communities?
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Share screen, please. I will discuss with you the impact of China's violation on the right to adequate food of Filipino fisherfolk in the West Philippine Sea. The West Philippine Sea has been and remains as one of the most important fishing grounds in the Philippines, with substantial contribution to the national economy and to the well-being of coastal communities. Scarborough Shoal, or Panatag Shoal, is a popular traditional fishing ground within the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. It could actually produce as much as 31 metric tons of fish per square kilometer of coral reefs per year. However, this is very tiny compared to the Kalayaan Island group because the coral reefs in the KIG produces 62,000 to 91,000 metric tons of fish per year. This volume of fish could supply the fish needs of 1.6 to 2.3 million Filipinos per year. However, the Filipino fisherfolk has the second half farmers, which is 36.2%. They are also part of the 13.6% or 3.4 million Filipinos who are experiencing hunger in the country. They are highly marginalized. They live in danger zone areas, in mangroves, in rivers, and in coastal zones. The maritime fisheries in the WPS actually provide employment to about 1.8 million people, most of whom are in the small-scale fishing sector. These fisherfolk actually provide for the 32-kilogram fish consumption and annual protein diet of every Filipino, constituting 12% and 47% of the total food consumption and animal protein diet of Filipinos respectively. Thus, you can see the importance of the West Philippine Sea in our food security and in the health and well-being of every Filipino, which cannot be overemphasized. Bigis ng Mangingisda is a federation of fisherfolk who plies the West Philippine Sea. It is composed of 6,000 members, which is being supported by PDI from Zambales, Pangasinan, Bataan, and Palawan. What is their main objective? Their main objective is to protect and defend their fishing rights in the WPS, specifically, and in the maritime regimes generally. However, in their everyday life, they have encountered problems and issues, which is detrimental to their well-being. The first issue is how to deal with the almost depleted aquatic resources in the municipal waters due to the IUU. Second is how to ensure and strengthen the fishing rights in the WPS in the face of Chinese aggression against Filipino fisherfolk. Third is how to arrest the environmental degradation in the Panatag Shoal due to the deterioration and destruction of the coral reefs and the dredging in the Oyen Bay by the Chinese Coast Guards and Chinese militia. The impact of the Chinese aggression to the Filipino fishers, and this is environmental destruction. The destruction of the coral reefs in the West Philippine Sea negatively impacts the fishing industry and can actually cost 3 million fishermen their jobs. The destruction of the reefs can be detrimental to our ecosystem because when reefs are destroyed, the fish living there lost their habitat and an important source of food. The fish will abandon these reefs and look for other habitat. Damaged reefs mean less fish to catch. If this continue, this can ultimately lead to the collapse of the fishing industry in Zambales and Pangasinan. Second is economic impact, the loss of livelihood of the fisherfolk. The marginal fishermen and their families suffer further hunger and impoverishment from the Chinese aggression. Before the Chinese incursions, according to Pangasinan fisherman Christopher De Vera, their catch reached 2 to 3 tons for 4 days at sea. However, after the Chinese Coast Guards and the Chinese militia prohibited them from fishing in the Philippines' own EEZ, their catch dwindled. 10 days at sea can only earn them about 150,000. From the total amount, the capital, the fuel, the ice for preserving, the freezing the fish, food and water for the 12 crew members, and other supplies and materials amounting to 50,000 will go back to the capitalists. The remaining 100,000 will be divided between the boat owner and the 12 crew member. Half of that immediately goes to the boat owners. So only 50,000 is left to be divided among the crew members. If you divide it by 12, each one will receive 4,166. From that 4,166, 2,000 will go back to the boat owner because of the cash advance requested by the crew member to be given to the family before they sail out to the Scarborough Shoal. So he has only 2,166. He immediately buys half sack of rice worth 1,000 in order that he will not have any work. After that, he still has to pay the sari-sari store where they have credit because They get their needs from there, and they have to also pay the rental. The fisherman is left with almost nothing. He just hopes that the family can subsist until his next fishing venture. According to the fisherman Vicente Paluan, his family cannot afford a home of their own or pay for their health care, nor even the education of their children. They cannot even buy clothes or provide proper diet and nutrition. Due also to the travel prohibition during the pandemic lockdown, the fish catch of the municipal fishers cannot be transported to other villages or to other provinces. And because of this, it is sold at a very, very cheap price to the village traders. So that is the condition of the fisherman. Social impact. They experience psychological trauma. Most of the fishers who had gone to the West Philippine Sea and who experienced harassment and intimidation from the Chinese Coast Guards and Chinese militia have psychological trauma. Some abandon fishing and do not want to go out to the sea anymore. Others, like J.R. Ermita, live in constant fear, afraid for his life. Delphine Igana cannot sail because every time he sees a ship, he has an anxiety attack and panic. The deep-rooted impact into the psyche of Filipino fishermen who feel that they were abandoned by the government and left on their own at the height of the conflict in the West Philippine Sea were paralyzed into inaction when the Chinese Coast Guard fired water cannons at them when they were chased, harassed, and intimidated. The last is the political impact of the lack of governance. There was lack of governance over the natural resources in the WPS because of the ongoing conflict. In conclusion, we would like to push and support the call of the biggest fisher folk for us to respect, protect, and defend their fishing rights, not only in the West Philippine Sea, but in the whole of the maritime regimes. Specifically, they demand the following. First, they demand the implementation of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the arbitral ruling. Second, the fisher folk should be protected by the Philippine Coast Guard when they are at sea. Third, demand for China's government to apologize and provide reparation for the commission of crimes against the Filipino fisher folks. China, under the United Nations Economic, Social, and Cultural Right, has an extraterritorial obligation to the Philippines to repay all the accumulated damages to the environment, like the destruction of the coral reefs in the Panatag Shoal, as well as the dredging in the Oyan Bay. Fourth, bring the economic and environmental degradation issues to the Supreme Court and the territorial dispute to the international arbitration in order for conflict mitigation. Lastly, they are requesting for the creation of a comprehensive development plan for the small-scale fisher folk, especially those that fly the West Philippine Sea. While the bigger part of the responsibility falls on the Philippine government, civil society has its share of the responsibility. Civil society must be vigilant and must engage the government. There is the pressure that civil society must bring to bear upon the government so that it will do what is required of them. We call on both the government and the civil society to perform their roles to promote and protect the right to adequate food for all. Thank you so much.
Maraming salamat, Ria, for that presentation. No, it's a very comprehensive and concise presentation on the fisheries. Let's try to go back to Leonardo now. Leonardo Quaresma po, siya po ang presidente ng Masinloc Fishermen. Pa-unmute na lang po. Okay po, magandang hapon. Ayan po, malinaw na po. Ayan po. Leonardo, kamusta ba ang sitwasyon ng mga mangingisda diyan sa Masinloc?
Magandang hapon din po sa inyong lahat. Una-una po sa Rappler po, sa lahat po ng staff. At ako po si Mr. Leonardo Quaresma, tagapangulo po ng Federated Association of Fisherfolk po dito sa bayan ng Masinloc. Sa kasalukuyan po ngayon sa mga pangyayari sa ating pong mga kasamahang mangingisda dito po sa aming bayan ay bali 30% po yung nawalan ng kanilang mga hanap buhay dahil sa issue na nagaganap po sa Scarborough Shoal. Unang-una po dahil sa hindi po maganda yung sitwasyon na nangyayari sa kasalukuyan sa Scarborough Shoal na dati-rati na maganda yung pangisdaan sa nasabing lugar kagaya po ng nabanggit ng ating pong kasama ay napakaganda rati yung pangisdaan sa nasabing lugar. Subalit itong mga huling panahon na kagaya nitong pag-upo ng administrasyon ng Duterte ay 2016 na sinasabi niya na pwede nang makabalik ang ating pong mga mangingisda sa nasabing lugar. Subalit noong sinubukan po ng ating mga kasama na bumalik sa pangisdaan sa nasabing lugar sa Scarborough Shoal ay hindi na po ganong kaganda yung nasabing pangisdaan sa nasabing lugar. Sapagkat pangalawa, yung volume na dating nahuhuli naming maganda sa nasabing lugar na dati-rati sa loob ng 4 na araw ay nakakahuli na yung ating mga kasamang mangisda ng hanggang 4 na tonelada at bumabalik na sa tabi para itinda na yung kanilang mga huling isda. Subalit sa ngayon po dahil sa pagkasira ng ating likas yaman kagaya ng mga corals na dati-rati napakaganda yung pangitlugan ng ating karagatan. Sa ngayon dahil sa ginagawa ng mga Chinese sa nasabing lugar ay sinira na po nila yung ating likas yaman. Kaya po babalik man tayo doon na sa dating normal na sitwasyon sa pangingisda, mawala man yung mga Chinese Coast Guard na nandiyan sa Scarborough Shoal, ay hindi na po kagaya ng dati yung volume ng huli ng isda sa nasabing lugar. Kung kaya yung supply ng ating pong produksyon ng isda dito sa bayan po ng Masinloc at sa probinsya ng Zambales ay hindi na po ganong karami yung volume ng isda na naipoproduce ng ating mga mangingisda sa ating pong mga consumers sapagkat ang lugar po na ito ay hindi na po ganong karami yung nasabing volume ng isda na uhuli. So sa ngayon ay naghihirap po yung kalagayan ng ating mga kasaping mga mangingisda dito po sa aming bayan sapagkat yung dati na maganda yung sitwasyon ng kanilang paghahanap buhay sa nasabing lugar ay hindi na po ganong kaganda yung kanilang panghuli. Babalik man sila ay wala na po silang babalikang magandang pangisdaan sa nasabing lugar. Kung dadako naman po tayo sa ating municipal na katubigan ay very crowded naman na po yung ating pong pangisdaan sa ating municipal water. Bakit? Unang-una po sa dami na po ng mga mangingisda ay hindi na po kayang suplayan ng volume ng nahuhuling isda dito po sa ating municipal water sa ating pong mga mangingisda. Pangalawa, nandiyan pa po yung mga gumagawa ng mga illegal na gawain ng mga paghahanap buhay, kagaya ng mga paglalagay po nila ng mga fish cages na siyang sumisira naman po sa ating likas yaman. Sapagkat yung ginagawa ng ating mga fish cages operator dyan ay overfeeding naman po yung kanilang ginagawa kung kaya't nagdudulot po ng toxic sa ating pong karagatan. So ganyan po ang sitwasyon ng aming pong mga kasaping, mga mangingisda dito po sa bayan ng Masinloc at hindi lamang po dito sa aming bayan kundi sa buong lalawigan ng Zambales. Kung kaya't ngayon, kung ano-ano na lamang po yung alternatibong pinagkakitaan naming mga mangingisda, yung iba nagtatricycle, yung iba nagkakarpintero, pumapasok sa mga construction. So yan na po yung buhay ng mga mangingisda dito sapagkat dapat sana na pinatutupad ng ating pamahalaan yung totoong batas para sa ating pong pangisdaan. Subalit hindi patutupad yung mga batas po ng ating mga mangisda ay marami po yung pumapasok na mga illegal poachers po sa ating pong pangisdaan na hindi dapat, na dapat sa Pilipino lamang yung nakikinabang sa ating pangisdaan ay mas nakikinabang pa yung mga dayuhan sa pong lugar.
Okay po.
Kaya ito po yung aking nakikita na maaring mangyari na dapat sana yung ating pamahalaan ay ipatupad nila yung tamang batas po sa ating pangisdaan para sa ganon ay yung mga gumagawa ng mga illegal dyan ay dapat maparusahan at para sa ganun ay sumagana yung ating yamang dagat. So yan po yung aking may babahagi. Maraming pong salamat sa inyo lahat.
Maraming salamat sa iyo, Leonardo Quaresma. No? Bilang huling katanungan para sa inyo ni Ria and Leonardo, sa paanong paraan maaaring makasuporta itong mga kababayan natin, syempre yung mga civil society organizations at syempre ang pamahalaan para matugunan itong mga problema ng mga mangingisda. Kasi kanina si Ria, nabanggit niya yung bigger picture, tapos ninarrow down ito ni Leonardo sa mga nagaganap on the ground. So, paano makakasuporta mga kababayan natin at ang pamahalaan? Simulan natin sa iyo, Ria.
Sa tingin ko po, ngayon,
Okay.
ay doon na para sa ang tagapangulo ng ating bansa para maipatupad yung tamang batas para hindi nagahari yung mga dayuhan at tanging Pilipino lamang ang dapat na masunod na mangisda sa ating pong pangisdaan at maipatupad yung tamang batas para hindi po masira yung ating likas yaman para gumanda po yung pangisdaan.
Maraming salamat, Leonardo.
So,
Okay.
yan po yung aking pong pananaw dyan para sa kabutihan po ng marami. Maraming pong salamat.
Salamat din po. Miss Ria, kayo po.
Yeah, okay. Actually, napakahalaga to reclaim and gain possession of the WPS and the Philippine EEZ. Ngunit, kinakailangan din na alam ng gobyerno ang responsibilidad niya. Dali siya, dapat may definitive instrument in terms of the WPS in our exclusive economic zone. Why this? Dahil kinakailangan maging proactive and should think of the welfare and the national interest of the country. Minsan nagiging apologies pa nga ang ating gobyerno. That's not Number two, I think the civil responsibility is the responsibility of the government to protect the people and defend the people's rights. That's, I think, is number one. Actually, ang laki-laki ng perang ginugugol sa ating military. Ngayon, dapat naman, bahagi na nila ng suporta ang mga mangingisda at ipagtanggol ang West Philippine Sea para magkaroon doon ng patrol. Wala tayong patrol eh. Actually, the fisher folk are all alone in the West Sea. Kahit yung mga Coast Guard, they bombard them with water cannons. They will chase them, they will intimidate and ganun ang sitwasyon ngayon sa West Side. Even the Filipino people should demand from the government what is rightfully ours. And that is the reclaiming of the exclusive economic zone and the West Philippines.
Okay.
Hello?
So we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Ria Teves. She is with the People's Development Institute, and we also heard from Leonardo Quaresma mula sa Masinloc. So maraming salamat, Ria and Leonardo, sa pag-share ng mga stories kung ano ba ang nangyayari sa mga communities dito. So I think this really helps us understand in a human way what happens and what the impact is of what's the issue that's happening in West Philippine Sea. Kasi alam mo, Jules, when we think about West Philippine Sea, akala natin this is just about territory. We think it's just about sovereignty. Pero, you know, hearing the stories na meron mga psychological trauma ang nangyayari dahil you know, when they go out at sea, they get attacked, and that has psychological trauma, that has impact on a very human level. And you know, in terms of livelihood, parang they work so hard. It's a hard job, yet kahit na gaano kahirap and how hard they work, no matter how hard they work, hindi pa rin yun sapat to support a family, diba? To pay rent or to have an education for their children. So thank you very much, Ria and Leonardo, for sharing those insights. This really brought it down to a human level.
Thank
Pati
you
ako,
very much
Jules,
po.
yeah, I was very struck by the stories. Very, nakakaiyak actually kung isipin
Yes.
mo, Jules.
Damdamin po yung mga pangyayari, Madam, dahil sa ganitong sitwasyon ng kalagayan po nating mga mangingisda dito po sa ating pangisdaan. Kawawa din po at kulang na rin po yung supply na ating pong mga consumers na dapat sana ay mabigyan ng sapat na pagkain ng ating pong mga kababayan.
Tama. Okay. Maraming salamat po muli, Leonardo and Ria. Thank you so much for humanizing the whole issue kung paano siya
Okay,
nakaka-apekto.
maraming salamat din po sa inyo lahat.
Thank you
Thank
po.
you so much.
Thank you, Ria and Leonardo. Yan. Na-connect natin, Happy, no? From the fishes mismo into our table. Kasi usually, nakikita na lang natin yung kakainin na natin mismo pero sobrang layo nung storya, 'di ba? Sobrang haba nung storya, I mean, na pinanggalingan ng mga isda na 'yan at yung mga mangingisda mismo, yung mga kinakaharap nilang mga pagsubok. Maraming salamat po muli. Ngayon naman, Happy, quick break po muna tayo para sa mga participants natin. Before we jump to our panel discussion, let's do a quick trivia game kung kaano nga ba tayo kaalam itong mga viewers natin patungkol sa fisheries at yung topic natin for today. Ano bang instructions natin dito, Happy?
Okay, mga classmates, sana nakinig kayo kanina sa mga sinishare namin na numbers and mga information. So easy instructions lang ito. We have 3 questions for our Zoom participants. So lahat kayo nakasama namin ngayon sa Zoom, pwede kayong sumali. So all you have to do is be the first one to type in your answer doon sa chat room natin. So marami actually nakikita ko nagchat-chat na sila ngayon. So let's leave the chat for let's leave that chat room for now. Tapos after I ask the question, as soon as I end the question, so babasahin ko yung question, pwede na kayo agad maglagay ng sagot ninyo sa chat room. And whoever gives the first correct answer, so pwede kayong sumagot pero yung mananalo ay yung tamang sagot ang mananalo. So meron tayong small prize from Rappler and from our partners. So, ang first question natin.
Okay, game? Alright,
Okay.
First question. Sana narinig nyo to. Okay, how much of total marine catch in the Philippines comes from the WPS? Again, how much of total? Ang bilis. Ayan, okay. Ilang percent? Okay, Happy, check natin sino pinakauna.
Okay, teka lang. Wow, ang bilis. Okay, we have a winner already. Yung unang naglagay ng tamang sagot, si Jeff Daniel Lauron. So, Jeff Daniel Lauron, tama yan. 7% ang tamang sagot. So, 7% of our total marine catch comes from the West Philippine Sea. So, very good. Ang galing.
Yes, ang daming mga sumagot. Congratulations. Okay, next question tayo, Happy. Okay, ito medyo complicated to from my end. Okay, our next question is multiple choice po ito. Okay, ayan, nakikita nyo rin po. What is the scientific name of galunggong? Nako, masarap yan. Is it A, Sardinella lemuru? Letter B, Katsuonus pelamis? Letter C, Thunus albacares? Or D, Decapterus macrosoma? Tama po bang basa ko, Fish Right? Pero in any case yan po.
Hindi naman ako makasagot.
Okay.
Sana okay.
Pili po
Natatawa
tayo.
ako, Jude.
Hindi ko alam.
Natatawa ako.
Para tayong pera o bayong, di ba?
I know. Tsaka meron ng sumasagot kahit hindi pa tapos yung question
Oo nga
mo. So,
Okay. So sino po ang nagwagi?
okay. Meron dito the correct answer. Teka lang. Sorry, please. Okay.
Letter D po ang tamang sagot. Yan po ang galunggong. So next time na gusto nyo bumili ng galunggong, bakit hindi nyo subukang gamitin ang scientific name? Okay?
Okay. So let's see. Ito, ayan, si Precious Guarana. Precious Guarana with the correct answer D. So, Decapterus macrosoma. Ayun ang tamang sagot. Yan ang scientific name ng galunggong. So, Precious, ikaw ang nanalo. Thank you po. And Jules, our last question. Kinabahan ako doon para akong nasa school ulit. So,
Ay,
mga classmates,
merong ano,
eto na.
happy.
Third question.
Si ano raw, si Hermini ang nanalo. Si Hermini. Sabi ng move. Pati sabi rin ni Precious mismo.
Ay,
Okay.
sorry.
Pero
Okay.
plus point sa'yo, Precious, for also noticing
For honesty.
that. Honesty is the best policy. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, next na. Third question natin, Happy. Our final question for today. Ito na po. What is the total territorial water area of the Philippines, including the exclusive economic zone? Go. Pati yung unit dapat tama.
Yes.
Okay, gano'n nga ba kalaki? Basta more than ano to? Basta millions to, millions. Okay? Ano nga ba ang tamang sagot? Happy?
Ang tamang sagot ay 2.2 million square kilometers. So 2,200,000 square kilometers. Yun po ang tamang unit of measurement. Sorry, Jules, hindi ko makita yung name kung sino yung first.
Okay,
Pero
let's check.
2.2 ang tamang sagot. So maraming nakakuha nun.
Teodoro Jose Mata. Congratulations. Ayan. Fun pala tong mga quiz natin, no? Gawin natin to lagi. Ayan. Okay, thank you so much po for participating at kukontakin na lang po namin kayo para po makuha ninyo ang inyong papremyo. Okay.
Ang galunggong gift pack. Joke lang.
Parang gusto ko rin nun. Masarap ang galunggong. Okay, let's proceed to the next part of the program. Okay, at this point, panahon na po para sa ating roundtable discussion. Again, for our viewers, you may share and tweet your takeaways, yung mga learnings po natin using our hashtags, #ourfish_our_life and #thisistthelife. Okay? So meron tayong makakasama na mga eksperto na magbabahagi ng kanilang mga kaalaman tungkol sa ating usapan ngayong hapon. Happy? Sino-sino nga ba sila?
Okay, our panelists. First, we have the director of the National Coast Watch Center, Roy Echeverria. And next, we have again the president of People's Development Initiative, Ria Teves. So we will be hearing from Ms. Ria again. Who else do we have, Jules?
Right, makakasama rin natin Happy muli ang professor mula sa Biology Department ng College of Science ng DLSU, Dr. Menchi Ablan Lagman. At kasama rin natin ang Program Coordinator ng Community-Centered Conservation Philippines and Micronesia Program, Ray Ramilo. Okay, magandang hapon po.
Welcome everyone. Welcome panelists to our roundtable discussion. So, simulan na natin. Let's start with Roy and Ray. Ano po ang reaction ninyo sa presentation ni Dr. Menchi at yung presentations ni Ria at Leonardo? So, let's start with you, Roy.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. To the presenters and also to our panelists. I can only empathize with what Ma'am Ria Teves presented. Also yung sa kay President ng Masindok Fishermen's Association. But all I can say is I can only speak for the center, and we remain committed to our mandate. That is to monitor the happenings in the West Philippine Sea, including the Bajo de Masinloc. I can say that despite the lack of vessels that we have, yet we still pursue going there with our Coast Guard and the Navy patrolling our seas. Kahit na may dispute, even the presence of foreign military vessels, not only Chinese vessels, we also have their Vietnamese, all others, including US. We are, as law enforcers and the military, we remain committed to the welfare and protecting our Filipino fishermen. Yun lang po ang reaction ko po.
Salamat po. It's good to know na meron pong monitoring na nagaganap. Thank you po for your reaction. Let's move on to Ray Ramilo. Over to you. What can you say po about the presentations today, Ray?
Nakakalungkot na lagi malimit nating naririnig yung mga kwento ng mga maliliit na mangingisda sa ating karagatan. So laging argabyado yung maliliit na mangingisda at mga Pilipino doon sa ating pangisdaan. So malungkot ang mga kwentong naririnig natin, pero dapat hindi tayo tumigil bilang mga Pilipino na ipagtanggol yung ating pangisdaan at kagaya ng ang mga mangingisda na Pilipino at kailangan talaga nilang ipagtanggol yung kanilang pangisdaan at kailangan itong suportahan ng ating pamahalaan. So yun lang, medyo malungkot na marinig yung mga ganung kwento. Pero may magagawa tayo.
Yes. Maraming salamat, Ray. Ayan, no, nakakalungkot, pero syempre sinasabi ni Ray sa atin na maaari din tayong umaksyon para dito, para matugunan yung mga problema. Okay, so ngayon dumako tayo sa susunod nating tanong. IUU fishing, no? It's a very complicated issue and minsan nga technical pa yan, lalo na para sa mga kababayan natin na hindi naman talaga lubog sa issue ng pangingisda. So mag-focus po muna tayo sa access ng stakeholders sa information, di ba? From your point of view po, mula po sa inyong mga perspectives, how can we ensure that information is well understood by those affected in this issue? Let's begin with Roy again. Roy, go ahead. Sir, kindly unmute po.
Yes, as I was saying, I think this information is accessible to all and understandable to the public. As the national government, through the Bureau of Fisheries, provides this information through various available means, such as the conduct of flagging briefing, and even the presidential briefings spearheaded by the Presidential Communications Operations Office. We also, as from the National Coast Watch Council, spearheads the Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month. This is done the whole month of September, where we conduct various activities to enhance awareness and consciousness of the Filipinos on the maritime and archipelagic features of our country. This year's theme was, in fact, our seas, our livelihood, our heritage, connecting lives and nations. This highlights the nation's rich maritime history. For the entire month of September, concerned agencies held several face-to-face and virtual activities designed to inform the general public about the Philippine maritime and archipelagic features. Yun lang po.
Maraming salamat, Roy. Dr. Menchi, kayo po. From the academe side.
Ang mahirap kasi sa pag-communicate, di ba? Kailangan natin, matagal na kami nagpupunta ng Masinloc. And I've seen, I understand, sir, yung kung anong pagbabago nakikita natin. Ang nadadala namin yan sa classroom, kung saan kami nagtuturo ng susunod na henerasyon ng mga individuals. Ang maganda rin is, kailangan din namin ito dalhin sa mga places like yung IFS, yung ating foreign service, yung sa government agencies, kasi meron din sila mga training programs. Talagang kinukwento namin to na, yung isda, hindi yan nanggagaling at naglalanding sa atin lang. Ang ginagawa ng ibang tao sa resources natin, kung nagre-reclaim sila ng reef, nawawalan ng bahay yung mga isda natin, tayo naapektuhan. So from our academe side, kung saan kami magkakaroon ng opportunity to bring out this information, and then we also go at par with our international counterparts in terms of the research that we try to do para naman magkaroon tayo ng credibility in both sides. So kung saan kami tawagin, go kami. And that is most especially sa government agencies na international foreign policy.
Maraming salamat, Dr. Menchi. Ray, kayo po.
Siguro I can share what we are doing in Calamianes kasi hindi lang naman nangyayari yung IUU fishing at the international waters, kundi doon sa ating mga municipal waters. So what we are doing in Calamianes through Fish Right Program and with DFAR and the local government units, yung mga ganitong kasi may dahilan is maganda maintindihan natin ano yung human and social side of fishing at yung ba't nangyayari yung IUU fishing at the municipal water. So mas doon yung tinututukan namin pagdating sa awareness campaign and pagpapalaganap ng impormasyon tungkol sa IUU. So ang ginagawa namin sa Calamianes ay bumubuo, kumbaga nai-involve yung kabataan. So we have youth educators, we have peer educators, teachers, para mas madali nilang maintindihan kung sila yung makikipag-usap sa kapwa nila mga isda. Kasi baka kasi kulang lang yung bakit ba hindi natin ma-convert itong mga nag-illegal to legal fishers at the municipal waters or even doon sa loob ng kanilang komunidad, ay baka mas hindi lang nila naiintindihan yung kanilang role or responsibility doon sa sustainable fisheries. So mas doon natin tinututukan yung kampanya at edukasyon doon sa mas madaling intindihin ng kanilang kapwa mangingisda at pagbibigay ng mas ibang pamamaraan. So dapat maintindihan natin yung social and human side of fishing. So nakailangan i-consider ito ng ating mga policy makers, ng mga managers ng fishers. So mas palawakin, mas i-grounded natin, kaya mahalaga na i-involve ang youth at bumuo ng mga champions doon sa local level to maabot natin yung talagang gusto nating makakuha ng tama at sapat na impormasyon para malabanan natin itong IUU fishing.
Magandang angle yan, Ray, no? Kasi parang hope-based approach siya, na parang gusto natin na ma-convert itong mga illegal fishers at mas maunawaan nila kung ano yung impact ng ginagawa nila sa sustainability ng fishing. That's a very good point. Thank you so much, Ray. Ria, kayo po, ano pong pananaw niyo on the communication side?
Okay, in terms of communication side, I think there are two levels. The first one will be on the fisher folks at the ground level. The second one is the publics. So sa punto ng ating mga mangingisda, sa tingin ko, kinakailangan ng capacity building measures in terms of training and education. They have to know their rights. Kasi karamihan po ng ating mga mangingisda naaapi at nabubuli, nahaharas. Hindi po nila alam ang kanilang mga karapatan. So kinakailangan alam nila ito para kaya nila mapagtanggol ang kanilang mga sarili. Pangalawa, kinakailangan din malaman nila ang mga batas. Hindi lamang dito sa Pilipinas dahil sila ay mga mangingisda, maganda siguro magkaroon ng training and education kung ano ba itong UNCLOS, kung ano ba ang ating mga maritime regimes, at ano ang responsibilidad at obligasyon ng gobyerno at ang responsibilidad ng mga mangingisda. Napakahalaga ho nito. Pati po yung Philippine Navy at saka yung Philippine Coast Guard, sa tingin ko, kinakailangan malaman din nila ang puntong ito dahil sila ang nagtatanggol ng ating mga karagatan. In saying that, nakikita ko rin sa hanay naman ng publiko, maganda din yung sinabi ng ating kasamang si Ray, na napakahalaga na mag-identify ng champions sa baba. Kinakailangan po kasi ito dahil kung minsan ang ating mga mangingisda natatakot o nahihiya. Pero kung makapagpapalitaw po tayo ng mga leaders at champions na siyang mangunguna para mabigyan ng lakas ng loob ang ating mga mangingisda para ipagtanggol nila ang kanilang mga karapatan, napakaganda po nito. Doon po naman sa hanay ng edukasyon, hindi lamang po sa ating mga mangingisda, kundi para sa mga citizens ng ating bansa. Sa tingin ko po, kinakailangan ng educational materials. And do it in multimedia. Pwede pong pamphlets, pwede sa TV, pwede sa radyo. Maganda din po sa radyo kasi sa probinsya ang access ng mga mahihirap ay radyo. So kinakailangan po ito, pero dapat sa napakasimpleng pamamaraan para maintindihan ito ng mga tao. Maganda din po siguro kausapin natin si Secretary Briones para isama ito sa ating curriculum. Napakahalaga po ng ating maritime regimes para hindi ito sama, para maintindihan ng mga bata, pati na po ng mga matatanda kung ano ang kahalagahan nito. Dahil hindi lang po ito karagatan, kundi ito ay naglalatag ng ating seguridad sa pagkain sa buong bansa. So, yan lamang po.
Okay. Maraming salamat, Ria. Right now, let's talk about the environmental impact. So let's look at it in the angle of yung na-mention mo kanina sa presentation mo, meron environmental damages na nangyayari. So can you share with us specific data points or relevant stories that you might have para our listeners and our participants here in Zoom can visualize and understand these threats on an environmental angle? And maybe how it affects as well our food security. So while you're here, Ria, I'll ask you to start. And then I'll throw it to the rest of the panel.
Maganda yung sinabi ng ating kasama, no? Kasi napakahalaga talaga na pangalagaan natin ang ating kalikasan. Ang nangyayari sa municipal waters, pati sa West Philippine Sea, first, at the municipal water level, there's proliferation of fish pens and fish cages, number one. And the mangroves are being destroyed to give way to the fish cages, which actually lead to the destruction ng mga nakatira doon, katulad ng crabs, seashells, mga seaweeds, nawawala na yan. Pati ang ating mga isda, kasi wala silang habitat. Dagdag pa dito, the feeds that are being fed in the cages para sa mga bangus. Yung excess nito, bumababa ito sa bottom ng ng municipal waters. Ito ay nagiging sleet and mud. Kung kaya, dahil dito, nawawala ng oxygen ang tubig. Sa kawalan ng oxygen, nagre-resulta ito sa pagkamatay ng mga isda sa karagatan. Samantala, yung mga waste na nanggagaling sa coal power plant pollutes the municipal waters. After that, yung mga mine tailings naman na nanggagaling sa bundok dahil sa mga madaming minahan sa Zambales, yung mga chemical waste, pumupunta ito sa ating mga lupain, lalo na sa agrarian lands. Pumupunta ito sa rivers, pumupunta ito sa municipal waters. Ano ang epekto nito? Sa lupa na kung saan nagtatanim ang ating mga magsasaka, nagiging hard ang lupa, hindi na ito matamnan. Patchy and hard. Nawawala ang fertility ng soil. Sa rivers naman, pag napollute ang water, yung mga nakatira sa tabi nito, yung drinking water nila napopollute. That was the case in Matalbis na aming tinutulungan. Hindi na nila mainom ang kanilang tubig dahil polluted na ito ng chemicals. Sa municipal waters, it's the same. Yung mga chemicals na napupunta sa ating municipal waters ay nakakasira ng buong karagatan. At ang mga tao na pumapasok o nagsiswim doon ay nagkakaroon ng skin diseases. So, it is very unhealthy to swim now in Masinloc because it is full of waste materials. Yun yung kahalagan ng pagprotekta ng kalikasan. Kaya napakahalaga nito sa kabuuan ng ating pagprotekta ng ating karagatan.
Right. Thank you very much, Ria. You explained clearly how one thing affects everything, diba? It's all connected. Yeah. So thank you, Ria. Let's move on to Ray. Ano po ang mga nakikita niyong environmental impact ng IUU fishing?
Yes. Inexperience namin sa Calamianes. So, ang mga nado-document or documented IUU fishing, kagaya ng Muruami fishing, trolling, super lights, hulbot-hulbot fisher, blast fishing, cyanide fishing with compressor. Napakalaki ng epekto nito doon sa ating coral ecosystem, doon sa ating marine ecosystem. So, alam naman natin itong mga illegal activities na to ay may long-term repercussions since yung damage nito, bago natin may balik yung habitat na nasira, maaring dekada o centuries bago makarecover yung ating coral. So isa lang yun doon sa masamang epekto ng IUU sa ating ecosystem. And isa pa, pag sa illegal fishing, yung unregulated, minsan hindi na lang yung targeted fish stocks or species yung ating nahuhuli. So nakakasama dyan yung mga endangered marine animals or iba pang species na nandun or mga maliliit na isda na nakakasama dun sa mga unregulated na fishing gears. And alam naman natin na meron din tayong epekto yan sa ating kabuuan sa sirkulo ng ating karagatan. So ilan yun sa mga nakikita nating masamang epekto nitong IUU. And minsan hindi rin yun naiintindihan ng mga nag-iillegal na kailangan makita natin yung pagkakadugsong-dugsong noong mga ginagawa nila dun sa kahalagahan ng mas malaking ekosistema. So ilan ito sa mga epekto ng IUU, yung sa endangered species, yung pagkasira at pagpapanumbalik ng mga nasirang coral ecosystem doon sa pangisdaan.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Kayo naman po, Roy, ano po ang nakikita niyong mga environmental damages dahil po sa IUU fishing? Roy, go ahead. You can unmute.
Yeah, of course, yung mga corals natin, sira na. And yung iba pang mga habitat ng mga isda natin. Kaya lalong lumalayo yung mga isda natin kasi sira na yung sa mga malalapit sa shorelines. Ang malimit na naririnig namin sa mga fishermen ngayon, dati pag nangingisda sila, malapit lang. Ngayon, nandun na sila sa pinakamalalim. Yun lang po.
Okay, salamat Roy. And over to you, Menchi.
Ang nalulungkot talaga ako sa mga lugar na, alam mo diba, nagsimula ka mag-aral ng marine environment. Bata ka pa. So, medyo matanda na ako. Pag binabalikan ko sila, may mga pictures nga ako papakita ko sana kanina, kinot out ko lang sa presentation. Kung ano yung nakikita mo dati, talagang halos wala na. Tapos matutuwa ka pa na yung mga, magugulat ka pa na mga yung younger generation, tuwan-tuwa sila sa nakikita nila. Gusto kong sabihin, hindi nyo nakita yan nung nakita ko. Nung ngayon, nakikita nyo, akala ko nyo ganyan dapat. Hindi ganyan yan dapat. Parang ang babaw na ng kaligayahan ba? Kasi alam na natin kung anong itsura nun bago pa siya nasira ngayon. And then ngayon, pag nakakita sila ng something, ang ganda, hindi ganyan na maganda, pangit na yan. Yung pinakamalungkot sa akin ngayon, yung area sa Bohol Sea, sa Meddebaguete, maraming reclamation na na-approve na doon ngayon eh. Hindi ko lang alam kung naiintindihan nila kung gaano ka-importante yung lugar na yan. Kasi doon nagsimula si Dr. Alcala na siyang naging nanganak ng idea ng marine protected areas na ginaya ng buong mundo. Early 70s yun, or 80s. I had the opportunity to really work with him. Tapos sa pagkaalaga-alaga ng lugar na yan, with the many marine protected areas and the very beautiful stories of that place. And now they're talking about reclamation. I am not so sure how di ba, alam mo yung ganun na feeling, how people there would feel, or maybe they think na yun talaga dapat ang itsura, samantalang hindi ganyan talaga dapat ang itsura niyan. Maganda yan, pangit to, pero sa kanila maganda na yun, tapos i-reclaim na natin yung iba. Alam mo yung ganun. Yung shifting blazelines yung pinag-uusapan natin dyan. And right now, I'm working in Batanes. Ang ganda ng lugar na yan. Wala pa kasi masyadong tao eh. And the marine and the coral, yung giant clam in that area. Pero hindi ko na ma-imagine kung ano magiging itsura niyan kung hindi natin na ipoprotect. Magiging pareho lang ng kwento ng lahat na nakikita natin ngayon.
Thank you po, Menchi. I really feel you in that. All these reclamation projects, tapos may gana pa silang tawagin na sustainable city daw siya or smart city, diba? What is sustainable about it kung grabe ang damage sa environment natin? So I'm with you there, Menchi. Jules, let's go to our last round of questions.
Okay, so as we move forward, no, what's our way forward, basically, given the context that we discussed from Leonardo's experiences in Masinloc, on the envy side, information side, maybe we could also include the econ side here. Ano yung pwedeng gawin ng ating civil society? What can the private sector do, and even the government as a whole, to address the challenges faced by the fisheries? Let's begin with Ria again. Ria?
Okay. As I have stated earlier, I think the first and foremost is for the government to define the position on the West Philippine Sea with respect to our national interest. Hindi pwede na yung interest ng ibang bansa ang ating pangangalagaan. Kinakailangan, ang unang-una muna, we should have a definitive stand on the West Philippine Sea. And we should implement the arbitral ruling para mapangalagaan ang ating mga mangingisda. I think that's the first one. And then, of course, implement the UNCLOS, as I have said earlier, which is actually tantamount to protecting our territorial waters until the exclusive economic zone. So in saying that, we can also, I think, develop a plan within the region in conjunction with the other countries in the region in terms of our regional interests rather than the interest of one country, because as we know, we do not recognize the 9-dash line. So in terms of exploration and exploitation in the West Philippine Sea or in the South China Sea, I think the region can benefit from this, and the Philippines likewise. So that's the second point. The third point, I think, is for the public to know what is the importance of the West Philippine Sea in our food security. I think these three important points are necessary. The last one, we need to have a campaign, advocacy, and training education, not only for the fisher folk, but also especially for the future generation.
Thank you, Ria. How about for you, Menchi?
I'm with you, Ria, in terms of that regional agreement. Kasi as it is, by ourselves, parang maliit tayo eh. Ang hirap i-discuss. And the fisheries platform is a very, very strong one. As I wanted to say kanina na talagang ang laki ng dependence kasi natin dito. Marami na tayong exchanges across the region for be able to do this. And, you know, after working in this for quite some time, parang puro kwento eh. Kailangan natin talaga ng like demonstration sites, kung saan tayo nag-agree, kung saan tayo may policy, for example, ng close and open season, and then we can show na talagang nag-improve ang fisheries production, ganyan. Maganda yan sa Palawan eh. Pati yung tawag ito, yung effects ng damage, kung paano na nagre-recover. We can show demonstrations of where this can be done. Sa Masinloc kasi parang talagang ang dami-daming things na nangyayari doon at the same time in terms of damage. Pero I guess that's one place where there had been historical, balikan natin mga giant marine parks, yung mga ganyan. Let's make stories of them, talk about them. Kasi hindi na naaalala na may mga kwentong ganyan nung araw, merong magandang place na ganito na pwede nating talk about what it was like before. These are the big fish. This is what it looks like. Tell the younger generation what beautiful reefs should look like so that they are not stuck with what they see now and they think that is beautiful. Nakakalungkot kasi over time. So, kalkalin natin ang mga baul in terms of that. And then finally, yes, let's take a stand. Let's fight for our fishers. Let's fight for I can't say it's our fish, but more let's fight for our fishers and to be able to make sure that, kasi ang fish is something that is gold, di ba? Pwede siya mga parang golden goose. Mga anak ng gold. Pero anything that is resource na place-based, like oil and gas or something, mauubos din yan eh, at some point. So if we invest on the fish, we are investing on something that will keep us alive for a longer period of time.
Thank you so much, Menchi. How about for you, Ray?
Yes, I also agree to Ma'am Ria and Menchi. So doon sa mga international at the local at the national level, kailangan talaga tayong may gawin. But kailangan din nating hindi tumigil doon sa ganung level. So kailangan meron din tayong gawin at the provincial, municipal at the local level. Like what we are doing in Calamianes. So we are expanding our marine protected areas and capacitating the communities to manage these marine protected areas. And pati yung LGUs, we lobby to expand their marine protected areas. So kasi mas maganda yun, nandun ka sa local, protektahan natin yung kaya nating protektahan. And of course, yung involvement talaga ng communities doon sa mga gawain sa pagpoprotekta. So gaya rin ng ginagawa sa Calamianes, yung mga na-convert na illegal fishers, ay pwede natin silang isama or gawing mga bantay dagat para may mga incentive silang makuha. Gayon din sa mga compliant fishers na dapat ay nire-recognize din. Dito sa Calamianes, meron kaming raise yung recognition awards of enhanced ecosystem na ginagawa siya taon-taon para kilalanin yung mga best practices ng communities doing management of marine protected areas, na meron din kami ditong women managed areas. So mas maganda na kilalanin natin ano ba yung ginagawa ng mga communities natin to protect their own lives and livelihoods. And maganda rin na natutulungan and nakakapacitate din natin yung LGU at nasusuportahan natin. Like meron din kaming ginagawa in Calamianes through fish right, kasi nagiging problema yung sa IUU, yung hindi natin yung unreported, di ba? Parang doon sa isang use, unreported. So meron tayong ginagawang mga caravans kasi yun yung isang problema, hindi makapunta yung fisher, mahal yung pag-register, pamamasahe. So ginagawa natin yung LGU ay tinutulungan natin na makapunta dun sa mga barangay para makapag-register and for boat and fisher registration na mas madali sa kanila. And then we can monitor and nare-record natin yung mga fish catch. So ilan ito sa mga bagay na ginagawa natin sa baba and na magko-contribute para masugpo natin, unti-unti natin masugpo itong problema natin sa IUU. So wag tayong tumigil doon sa labanan na kailangan merong apoy sa ibabaw, merong apoy sa ilalim, parang bibingka approach na dapat magsasabay na may ginagawa tayo sa taas at meron din tayong ginagawa sa ground. So yun yung aming gustong maibahagi para masugpo talaga natin itong ating IUU fishing problems dito sa ating bansa. And ganoon din yung pag-support doon sa mga gawain ng pag-aaral doon sa mga ekosistema na nandoon sa loob ng kanilang municipal waters. Dapat naiintindihan, lalo na ang mga LGUs, dapat naiintindihan, na-appreciate nila, nakikita nila ano bang meron kami dito na dapat namin ipagtanggol para mahikayat natin sila na sumama, magpasa ng mga batas, ng mga polisiya, ng mga ordinansa na magpuprotekta doon sa mangingisda, sa maliliit na mangingisda sa kanilang mga munisipyo at maprotektahan yung pangisdaan na nagko-contribute din doon sa kaba ng bayan nila. So, yun yung may share.
Maraming salamat sa iyo, Ray. Let's end with Roy. Go ahead po.
Yeah, for me, I believe yung pinakamagandang policy should be a whole of nation approach, especially on this issue on IUU fishing. One is we need to involve every Filipino para makatulong. Hello.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, dapat talaga ma-involve natin including our kabataan. In fact, yung center right now is supporting the and into partnership with the Kabataang Makadagat or Kamada. It is a non-government organization that aims to unite, organize, and utilize the youth sector in preserving and caring for marine life, coastlines, and all bodies of Philippine waters. We shared their vision and our mission to fight for the sovereign rights of our Filipino fishermen over the resources in the West Philippine Sea. To every Filipino's contribution, no matter how big or small, can truly make a great impact and can contribute to the country's fight against IUU fishing. And the participation of the various stakeholders, especially of course, the government with the lead, should be encouraged. Yun lang po.
Thank you so much, Roy, and to our speakers. Okay, so at this point, Happy, we'll open the floor for questions, and may we ask also our speakers, if you have the time, you could also directly answer here on the Q&A kasi marami po yung mga nagpaabot ng kanilang questions. But we picked some to be asked right now. Happy, go ahead.
Sorry, Jules, medyo marami. I just wanted to say also, we have a lot of questions that were sent. The chat room is so active in the Q&A box po, so we are overwhelmed with questions. So we will get to answer 2, but the rest, as we discussed earlier before when we were planning this, we will try and get answers to all of your questions. Tapos we will email it na lang to all those who signed up. So Jules, sorry, the first question is coming from?
The question is from Mauro Tonko. Okay, so for our panel, maybe Sir Roy could answer this, no? On maritime law enforcement in the municipal waters, what else can the PNP Maritime Group do to improve conduct of this marlin operations throughout the archipelago, much less the municipal waters of the Philippine stations in the WPS? Right?
Yes, but despite the challenges that we face right now, of course, we must accept that the government lacks resources and capability. But in spite of that, we are doing our best to conduct patrol missions in all areas that we deem are effective. Kailangan natin ng more patrol missions. Like every day, we have to patrol not only the West Philippine Sea, but also our municipal waters to discourage would-be perpetrators to conduct illegal fishing activities. Yun po, dapat talaga visibility, daily patrols, not only sa I believe our law enforcers must also reach out to the coastal communities, talk to their local leaders, to the populace there, and para maparating sa kanila kung ano yung mga problema. At kung meron ng mga information about illegal fishing activities, makakarating ka agad sa mga kinauukulan at ma-actionan ka agad. Yun po.
Thank you, Roy, for answering our question. Our next question is from Alex Andrea Noble. And the question is the damage done in the WPS irreversible po? Who would like to answer this question po? Dr. Menchi, you'd like to?
It's very difficult to what happens kasi with coral is maliliit siya na juveniles, 'di ba? Tapos habang lumulungi siya sa tubig, maghahanap yan ng uupuan. Tapos kung saan siya uupo, doon siya mag-grow. Minsan, pag na-destroy na yung coral or something like that, tutubuan na ng algae. Di pag tinubuan mo ng algae yan, normally, kakainin yung algae ng fish. Since wala ng fish, maiiwan dun yung algae. So wala nang uupuan yung coral. The verdict is still out on how we can actually do this. I don't want to think that the damage is irreparable, but I want to be realistic and say that it will be very difficult. And it can be difficult because of wala tayong kailangan ng assistant recovery. And sa feeling ko nga, dapat dun sa question na how can we actually get people to work together from different countries, this might be one of them. If you find an area that is totally, medyo difficult na sira na and all that stuff, and we can have joint, collaborative agreements, research, science. Kasi ang na-experience ko is when you get your teams together, pati yung mga estudyante mo. Estudyante ako ni Dr. McManus Tapos ngayon, tuloy pa rin ako after. Nung wala kasi dyan sa Philippines, naiiwan na lang siya dito, nakabalik ako. Yun yung mga things na kailangan natin iisipin. Generational ito, mahaba ang haul. And one of the ways that we can get people to work together across countries, ganito. Marine scientific research, collaboration, and yun, sa pagbalik ng dating nasira. Yun siguro yung way na pwede tayong mag-work together and make a demonstration na napakaliit, maliit lang siya. Pero yung sinasabi ni Sir Ray kanina na kailangan medyo sa baba din, parang bibingka. Gusto ko yung term mo, sir bibingka approach. Meron sa taas, meron sa baba, para may mangyari across these things. And very nice places, Palawan, will be very Calamianes, that might be very interesting. Masinloc, yun yung magagandang mga areas na gawin.
Okay.
Ma'am, question din po. Pwede rin po magtanong?
Go.
Pwede rin pong magtanong, ma'am? With regards po doon sa topic.
Yes, go ahead po.
Kasi po dito po aming ang nangyayari po ay maraming ini-implement na mga pulisiya like yung pagtatayo ng mga na marine management program ay patuloy naman po, pero ano yung kaparusahan sa mga local government unit na hindi tumutupad doon sa mga nasabing batas? Kasi una, dito sa aming bayan, alam natin na nagdudulot ng nagkakaroon ng visit sa amin pong daragatan. Pero patuloy pa rin yung pagbibigay nila ng moratorium ng restorator. So ito yung nakakasira kung bakit kahit nasabihin natin sana na mayroon pa tayong mga sa lukas municipal water. Kung patuloy naman yung pagtatayo nila ng mga fish cages dito sa nasabing lugar, bagamat ito ay mayroon ng tinatawag na yung tuloy rin naman yung fish cages kasi nasabi nila mayroon na itong yung limitasyon yung pagtatayo ng mga fish cages, pero limitasyon nga, pero lahat naman halos ng lugar ay tinatayuan na nila ng kanilang mga fish cages at palipat-lipat. So dito nagkakaroon ng mga fish kill dito sa aming karagatan. So ano yung dapat na gawing aksyon sa ating mga lokal na pamahalaan na hindi sumusunod doon sa mga nasabing mga batas? Kasi sila yung unang-unang kalaban po natin dito.
Correct ka dyan. Salamat po sa question, Leonardo. Miss Ria, baka ikaw po ang pwedeng makasagot nito. Ano po ba dapat ang punishment dito? Meron bang nasa batas natin? In terms of the current legislation, are there any penalties for LGUs that do not help enforce the protection?
Actually, it should be in the fisheries code. The problem in Masinloc is that the local government units at the municipal level does not share the ordinances that they created. That's one of the problems that we are facing actually in terms of our research. Ayaw pong mamigay, kahit na ordinances, guidelines, lahat-lahat, ayaw na mamigay. Especially in terms of the fish cages. Yung mga fish cages, tama yung sinasabi ng ating kasama si Leonardo, na ito ay bawal. Pero nagpo-proliferate ito sa Masinloc.
Yes po.
From actually the whole of Zambales up to Pangasinan, may proliferation ng fish cages. In fact, they do not even follow the spacing in between fish cages. Kaya ang ating mga mangingisda talagang hirap na dahil hindi sila makadaan para makapaglaot sa dagat. But the local government unit does not actually care about the poor fisher folk. That is the basic problem. And most of the fish cages based on our research, most of the fish cages in Masinloc are owned by Chinese and the local elite. So may malaki talagang problema in terms of disparities and gaps sa ang kinakailangan po natin, Leonardo, is for you to strengthen the organization para alam po natin ang ating mga karapatan, para makapag-usap tayo sa gobyerno hinggil sa mga pangangailangan ng mga mangingisda. Actually, I'm sad to hear nga, katulad nung nangyari sa 3 mangingisda na na-mention po dito, na hindi na halos makalaot except for one, si Jury Drio. In fact, they were called to Malacanang. I think you know this story. They were called to Malacanang kasi nga nakunan itong barter sa dagat. Nakunan ito, pinatawag ni Presidente Duterte sa Malacanang yung 3 mangingisda. Pero itong si Mr. Roque, instead of letting the fisher folk define what really happened, he just said that it is just a barter between the Chinese and the Filipino fisher folk. Talagang may disarray o may disconnect ang government implementation at sa mga pangangailangan ng mga mangingisda. I think that is the one that we have to resolve. And tama ang ating kasamang sa ating si Caroy na it should be a whole of nation approach. Kinakailangan magsama-sama, mag-unite para magkapagtulungan at mapaintindi kung ano talaga ang kalagahan. Hindi lang yan para sa mga mangingisda, pero para sa lahat ng Pilipino. Yung mga Manong Leonardo, kinakailangan po kunin natin ang mga batas at ordinansyang nasa baba. Kasi each LGU have different ordinances that they institute doon sa municipal waters. Sila po ang may hawak niyan hindi ang national government. So kinakailangan talaga campaign and advocacy. At saka that should be a public document, but they do not want to share. So that's the depth of the problem in Masinloc.
Thank you po, Ria, for sharing that. I also echo your sentiments. Kailangan, it's very important for us regular citizens na alam natin kung ano ang mga karapatan natin. So we know the law so that we know our rights, and so therefore we can hold government accountable. So thank you, Ria, for bringing it up. Nakikita natin really how this is connected, and this is a governance issue. And of course, you know, we are all aware of the upcoming 2022 presidential elections. Election season na po. So our last question, I will throw it po to Ray. Sorry, ito ang pinaka siguro mahirap na question. Ray, this is an election issue. What should voters be watching out for when they are choosing their candidates? Ano ba dapat ang mga stance ng mga kandidatong ito para masolusyonan ang issue na pinag-usapan natin today? Ray?
Mahirap nga akala. Anyway, ang simple lang naman yan simple lang naman yan. Kung simple kang mamamayan at nakikita mo na yung mga nagawa niyang pulisiya, mga pagkilos, pananalita niya ay umaangkop at maaaring makatulong sa iyong kalagayan, maaaring maiangat yung sarili mo, yung pamilya mo, yung komunidad mo, ay baka siya yung dapat or tamang kandidato na ihalal. Pero yan ay makikita mo hindi lang ngayong kampanyahan. So baka yan ay malalo, kasi mahalaga din, di ba? Dito nga sa IUU, dito sa fishing industry, mahalaga yung science. So siguro minsan gawan din ng konting pag-iisip, mag-research, tingnan, alamin, ano bang mga anong nagawa nito, anong mga kasaysayan nito bilang isang ama, bilang isang ina, bilang isang miyembro ng komunidad, bilang isang miyembro ng mas malaking komunidad. Doon siguro tayo bumatay. At kung ano yung sinasabi niya, dapat ginagawa niya. Dapat nakikita natin na meron siyang ginagawa para doon sa ating halimbawa, ang issue ng pangisdaan. Dapat tanungin natin, ano bang programa o plano mo sa pangisdaan? Maging ito man ay sa national, maging ito man sa ating lokal na pamayanan. Dapat ay hanapin natin yung mga kandidatong ganon. Dapat maging mas masusing mag-isip at magmasid at makinig sa mga naririnig natin para matukoy natin sino ba talaga yung tama nating iboto. So, yun siguro bilang isang botante din. So, yun yung mga tinitingnan ko na sana tingnan din natin.
Ayun. Salamat po, Ray. I know that was a very hard question, pero maganda yan sinabi mo. Sino bang mga candidates, do they do as they say? And I like what you said, na nakikinig ba sila sa research, sa datos, sa science, di ba? Saan ba sila, ano ba ang basis ng mga stance nila, saan sila kumukuha ng information? At and like what you said, go back to the science. This is all na research na to, na pag-aralan na ito ng maraming tao. So is that being listened to? So salamat, Ray, and salamat rin to all our panelists. Naging very naging mainit ang usapan natin, pero very exciting, at maraming salamat talaga. It really helped us understand kung ano yung issue na ito, diba? We started with what is IUU, and there's it's a very technical definition, but we now understand how real this problem is, how real it is for ordinary Filipinos, diba, like Leonardo, na livelihood nila ang nakasalalay dito. So maraming salamat to everyone. I'd like to call back Jules to join me now.
All right, thank you, Happy, and thank you to our speakers. Okay, so friends, as we end our program, we need to synthesize, of course, our learnings from today's program. So to introduce our speaker, let's call in Dr. J. Batombakal.
Good day, everyone. This is J. Batombakal, the director of the UP Institute for Maritime Affairs and Law of the Sea. I am speaking to you today from Pag-asa Island, our westernmost territory in the farthest reaches of the West Philippine Sea, accompanying a marine science expedition to establish the Pag-asa Island Research Station. It is early morning as I record this. The skies are deep black velvet, lit up with millions of pinpoints of starlight. One does not get such a spectacular view of this in the cities, where the glare of city lights obscures all but the brightest stars. Out here, the natural darkness surrounds you with a soothing calm, attenuated by the gentle sound of the sea lapping on the beach. The edge of a typhoon just passed the island yesterday, and a cool breeze creates a soft and relaxing environment that overwhelms you. But this is not always as peaceful and serene. On many days, especially in the summer months, the darkness is split by many lights in the sea around us. Perhaps a handful of our countrymen are among them, but for sure these are likely to be hundreds of foreign fishing vessels harvesting the rich fishery resources of the area. The West Philippine Sea is part of the South China Sea, where more than 50% of the world's fishing vessels, mostly Chinese and Vietnamese ships, harvest the rich fishery resources. The concentration of lights created by so much fishing activity is visible not only from the island itself, but even from outer space, where satellites can take nightly imagery of thousands of floating pinpricks of light in the sea. Overfishing and overexploitation threaten the sustainability of these fishery resources, from which we happen to derive an estimated 27% of our national capture fisheries production, according to Dr. Hazel Aseo of UP Cebu, one of the marine scientists I am with. These resources are concentrated in the areas around Pag-asa Island and the rest of the Calayan Island group, which is why the research station needs to be established here. Another one of our scientists, Dr. Cesar Villanoy of the UP Diliman, believes that the marine habitats of this area are biologically connected with the islands and waters of the Philippines. His oceanographic studies show that fish larvae generated by fish stocks here are carried by the currents to the coast of Palawan and around it into the Sulu Sea and the inter-island waters of the Philippines. The genetic connections have also been discovered by studies of other marine scientists. These ecological connections mean that the state of the marine environment and resources in the Calayan Island Group and the West Philippine Sea are of supreme importance to our ability, to the ability of our inter-island waters to regenerate and sustain fish stocks and other living resources upon which our archipelago depends for food security. Should the fish stocks in the West Philippine Sea collapse, the stability and sustainability of our archipelagic waters, our own fisheries, may be weakened considerably. Worse, if the fishermen overexploit the fish stocks and cause them to collapse, experience shows that such fishermen will then move on to the next nearest fishing grounds from which they can find fish. And that means that they will begin entering and ravaging our coastal and inter-island waters as well. The issue of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, or IUU fishing, is of global significance as fish stocks all around the globe are being targeted and harvested by the ravenous fishing industries of a few nations. For the Philippines, it is of great national significance because the fisheries of our archipelago, which have been taken for granted for hundreds of years, stand to be diminished and taken by foreign fishing fleets unless we take concrete steps to stop them. And here, the West Philippine Sea and in the Calayan Island Group, this is one of the most important areas in which we can take steps to try to combat IUU fishing. We must try to protect as much as possible the fishery resources in the West Philippine Sea to try to keep the overexploitation at bay, even as we also combat our own problems with overfishing and overexploitation of our own fishermen closer to home. It is for this reason that the UP Institute for Maritime Affairs and the Love of the Sea is pleased to work together with other groups like Fish Right and Rappler in raising awareness about these issues and the need to take action. As I am unable to participate in this session due to very slow internet speeds this far out in the sea, Assistant Professor Jackie Espinilla, also of UP IMLOS, takes my place in today's discussions. We hope that by working together, we can find more people who can take up the cudgels for our people and mobilize to protect our marine environment and resources from the scourge of IUU fishing in the Philippines and as part of a global effort against IUU fishing worldwide. Thank you and good day.
Let's call on Attorney Jacqueline Espanilla
Thank you,
for her
Happy.
synthesis. Yeah. Welcome, Jackie. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Napakaganda po na naging discussion natin ngayong hapon. We've learned so much from both the scientist perspective as well as from the people on the ground. And now I have the task of sort of summarizing and synthesizing and analyzing what has already been discussed. So I want to do it this way. So may 3 words akong sana gustong mabitbit natin from this afternoon's discussion. First, appreciation. Second, empathy. Third, awareness. So tingnan muna natin yung appreciation. So narinig natin kung gaano ka-importante ang West Philippine Sea sa ating lahat. Alam natin na importante siya para sa ekonomiya natin, importante siya para sa kultura natin, and importante rin siya para sa seguridad natin as a country. And the fact of the matter is, the word connectivity is something na talagang na-emphasize ngayon. Kung anong nangyayari doon, kahit napakalayo, darating at darating din sa atin dito sa mga bahay natin dito sa Pilipinas, yung mga nangyayari doon. So the effect actually reverberates throughout the country. And more than that, it also reverberates throughout the region. This is a regional issue. So hindi natin solo ang magiging negative effect ng mga nangyayari sa West Philippine Sea. It means this is a common concern that requires common solutions, that requires coordination, first intra-government and also around the region as well. So yung mga bagay na kwento kanina tulad ng mga Chinese dredging, yung pagsira ng mga coral reefs natin, lahat yan dapat may pakialam tayo. It's hard to pinpoint exactly the full effect of it, only that we know it is in fact something to be alarmed about. We're talking here millions of fish and billions of pesos in damages. Things na kahit sino mang tao maiintindihan na dapat meron tayong paki dito. It is a complex issue as has been highlighted by everybody so far. So certainly, kailangan natin tingnan ito sa iba't ibang perspektibo at ang solusyon din galing din sa iba't ibang perspektibo. Next, empathy. So for many people, it is very hard to care about the West Philippine Sea. Napakalayo eh. Walang kinalaman sa mga pang-araw-araw nating buhay dito. And for many people, it's just about lines in the water. And ano bang care natin sa ganun? But what we have heard today tells us or really highlights one thing. Our fisher folks are our frontliners. They are our unsung heroes that have helped bring our food to our tables, and they have in fact been giving so much but receiving so little by way of their livelihood, but also from us, from our support, from our government. So they deserve more. And this is where our empathy has to come in, and we have to find ways to ensure that they get what they need from us, from our governments. So tulad ng nasabi rin kanina, one way that we can do this certainly is to help them become more aware of what rights they have as fisherfolk. And beyond that, we should also take measures to help protect them. So this has actually been done. So gusto ko rin sanang i-clarify na hindi naman sa walang ginagawa ang ating gobyerno. Meron naman po talaga. But as I said, this is a complex problem. So walang silver bullet that can just fix everything overnight. So kunyari, meron tayong mga ginagawang bagay tulad recently, yung BFAR natin, nag-issue sila ng administrative order that helps rationalize yung fisheries management areas natin, taking an ecosystems approach. Those sorts of things, that kind of thinking, allows the areas where our fisher folk operate to be better taken care of, allow the fish stocks to regenerate, and kumbaga merong pag-iisip sa likod ng mga polisiya, hindi yung bara-bara na lang. And it's more unified because it's now one entire, as the phrase was used kanina, medyo whole of government yung approach nung polisiya na yon. The other thing is that there's a lot of effort also from the part of BIFAR, from DNR, to establish marine protected areas and networks of marine protected areas that once again address yung mga ecosystem damages that have been happening so far and allow the fish stocks to regenerate. Yung mga supportive actions na ganyan ay importante rin na bigyan natin ng pansin kasi hindi lang naman lahat ito tungkol sa nangyayari dun sa West Philippine Sea at sa China, although sinabi nga natin kung ano nangyayari dun, may connection dito. Isang malaking picture to, so kailangan talaga tingnan natin lahat ng mga moving parts ng problemang ito. One thing I'd also like to draw attention to, yung sinabi kanina ni Ma'am Ria, tungkol dun sa talagang alam naman nating totoo, maraming mga Chinese fishing vessels na nag-operate dun sa West Philippine Sea. At alam natin yung mga fishing vessels na yun, because of their presence there, nagkakaroon ng effect insofar as kung anong magiging makukuha ng ating mga fishermen. One thing I'd like to emphasize in relation to that is that these Chinese fishermen, and there's a lot of evidence to support this, are in fact subsidized by their governments. Subsidies in terms of fishing subsidies, subsidies in terms of how they're able to repair or create and build bigger and better boats, allowing them to stay farther out to sea, meaning malayo sa coastline nila, tapos malapit sa coastline natin, for longer periods of time. You can imagine how much fish they can catch in that amount of time and how much we are therefore deprived because of these subsidized activities. So that's one thing that we can definitely be more aware of. And because they are there, marami sila. I mean, there is strength in numbers, and that will definitely intimidate our fisher folk who are operating in the areas. More than that, they're also accompanied by their own gray ships and blue ships. So that makes it a little bit difficult para sa ating mga fisher folk na talagang pumosisyon doon. So one thing we can do is to ensure that there are more floating assets on our side to help accompany and protect our fisher folk. And that's already actually being done, but certainly pwede pang dagdagan yun. To the extent that this will help give a sense of security to our fisher folk, it will be very helpful for them. At mas hindi sila matatakot na pumunta doon sa talaga namang traditional fishing grounds nila dahil meron na silang kasama. Ganun din naman ang ginagawa ng bansang China at iba pang ibang bansa. So another thing that we can do is that we can also consistently and correctly file diplomatic protests when necessary and called for. We have been doing this, but not consistently. So that's where there should be more effort, because this sends a message that there is something wrong here, that there are some violations of international law that are happening, and certainly our voice does matter. And I want to disabuse everybody of the idea na maliit lang tayong bansa, magsalita tayo at magsalita, walang nangyari. Meron naman po. So tulad nung nangyari earlier this year in January, we did file a diplomatic protest. Nagpasa ang China ng kanilang revised Coast Guard law that allows their Coast Guard to take any measures necessary to expel any vessels that they feel is encroaching on, I quote, their waters. We immediately realized kung ang implikasyon nun kapag tayo i-accept lang yun, para bang pinamigay na natin ang West Philippine Sea. So yung mga ganung bagay helps confirm our position, gives our fisherfolk the assurance that the government, that our people have their back. That's empathy. The last word that I want to talk about is awareness. It is our job as Filipinos to be aware not only of the problems, but also the solutions and the measures and initiatives that we have at our fingertips already. And what we can do, in other words, to help address the problem. So one thing I also would like to emphasize is that we do have good laws. Our fisheries code got a recent revision in 2015, so around 17 years, if I'm not mistaken, bago nangyari itong revision na to. But the good thing about this recent revision under RA 10654 is that it focuses specifically on IUU fishing. Parang yung nickname nga nung revision na to is that it's the IUU fishing law. The good thing about it is that it recalibrated the penalties or the penalty scale in our old fisheries law na parang sobrang baba, hindi na siya fit for purpose, wala na siyang deterrent effect. Under the new revisions of the fisheries code, now mas appropriate na yung penalty scale. So just to give you an example, poaching, which is under that law, which is defined as any foreign fishing vessel coming to fish in Philippine waters, or EEZ, can now be given the penalty of about $600,000 up to $1 million. So certainly hindi siya small change at meron potential deterrent effect. And next, this IUU fishing law and this idea that our EEZ and our waters are reserved only for Filipinos echoes what is found in our Constitution, Article 12, Section 2, which does say specifically that our marine resources are reserved for the Filipinos. It gives special priority to our fisherfolk, in fact. And that is something that we have to consistently see reflected in the laws and administrative policies that are coming out of our government. So going back to RA 10654, isa pang magandang ginawa dito, and I think which also bridges us to the idea of what are potential ways forward, is that it emphasizes the need or codifies the requirement of having a monitoring, control, and surveillance system. So in the Philippines, and this is a requirement also of various international agreements that we have signed on to, there is a need to have proper monitoring of the behavior of fishing vessels in municipal waters and in the EEZ and further out. In having that kind of information, mas makakagalaw ng maayos yung mga maritime law enforcement agencies natin. Mas makakaresponde yung BIFAR, yung other concerned agencies, pag may nakikita silang kamalian, kunyari, commercial fishing vessels encroaching in municipal waters kung saan dapat ang mga artisanal o yung mga maliliit na mangingisda lamang ang dapat nandun. So yung mga ganyang bagay, dahil napag-iisipan natin yan at na-enforce natin through administrative issuances, yun yung mga kind of things dapat tuloy-tuloy natin ginagawa. Sa ngayon, ang ating vessel monitoring system, although nasimulan na, mahal kasi siya eh. So hindi pa siya completely off the ground. So maybe we can redirect more resources towards the full implementation of good, sound policies like that. So those sorts of things help protect the Philippines' sovereign rights in our EEZ. And I emphasize again, this is an exclusive right. It is ours as the coastal state to which that EEZ belongs. We are the ones who have the right to benefit from the fisheries resources that are found in that area. So also, there was a lot of talk about the importance of UNCLOS. And talaga namang, ang UNCLOS kasi ang tinatawag na Constitution of the Oceans at doon natin binabase ang ating mga karapatan sa dagat. Pero to add to that, meron din naman tayong ibang mga international legal commitments na nakakatulong din. And tulad nga ng nasabi ni Dr. Menchi, these are the things that upon which we should base our actions, and it can guide us in how we want to engage China or Vietnam or other countries that might have claims or insist on claims to our resources. I've always of the belief that right makes might, and having the law on our side tends to really support that idea. So in addition to the UNCLOS, recently we ratified the Port State Measures Agreement, which is an FAO document. And this is something that emphasizes, again, how we must address the IUU fishing problem. So when the Philippines ratified it, ang isang magandang epekto nito is that it's supposed to control yung pagland ng isda doon sa mga port. So parang siselyado natin yung mga ports natin sa mga fishing vessels na hindi maka-prove na nakuha nila sa tamang paraan yung mga isda nila. Meaning, hindi sila kikita. So kung hindi naman kikita yung fishing vessel, bakit pa sila mag-engage sa mga IUU fishing? So parang lumiliit yung mundo nila, for profit, because that is really the main motivation for them doing these sorts of things. So that's the Port State Measures Agreement. Another, or rather, another set of international legal commitments that I wanted to emphasize ay yung commitment natin under regional fisheries management organizations and regional fisheries management bodies. So many of these are treaty-based, meaning may siyang binding legal implication on us. And under those agreements that we entered into within a specified area, so let's say the West Philippine Sea is included specifically dun sa WCPFC commitment at Western Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, meron siyang sinasabi doon na mandatory conservation management measures. So actually, ang BIFAR natin nag-implement na ng ilang mga administrative order na nire-reflect kung ano yung mga legal obligations natin. Those sorts of things, once again, help emphasize or help protect and conserve the marine ecosystem and the fish stocks that are crucial, of course, to the livelihood of our fisherfolk. And then there are other things as well. The non-binding naman po, tulad ng mga International Plan of Action for IUU fishing and Code of Conduct din. Yung isang sigurong dapat ma-point out din natin, although this is a regional problem, in our region, we do not behave like, say, the EU, where there is some sort of top-down requirement or law that can be imposed on countries. We do not have a common fisheries policy. So tama rin po yung na-point out din kanina na iba-iba yung pagtrato natin sa problemang ito sa mga laws and policies of each country that is affected by the West Philippine Sea issue. But even though there is no top-down directive to have one common position on these things, certainly conversations can happen, and they are happening. But we should definitely push or try to sort of highlight the urgent issue areas na talagang kailangan magkaroon ng sort of agreement among the countries kung anong behavior para may coordination ang mga actions nila. And then on top of that, another thing, and this is my last point that we can do, is to make sure that the Philippines, as I said, amplifies its voice by taking part in ongoing conversations that are already happening. So that will have, of course, have impact on the West Philippine Sea. So one example of this is the ongoing negotiations at the WTO for the control or the disciplining of giving subsidies to fishing vessels. So the Philippines has been very active in this process. And tulad ng sabi ko kanina, isang malaking factor kaya ang dami-daming mga Chinese fishing vessel dyan sa South China Sea or sa West Philippine Sea is that meron silang support, in fact, encouragement from their government to go forth and take the resources of the West Philippine Sea. With our voice in that conversation to have that binding agreement to prevent precisely that, then maybe we can address this problem from a different direction. If we can help create another rule or framework that will prevent that sort of behavior from flourishing, then in that way, we can also help. So I think I will stop there, Happy. Yeah. So thank you very much again for having me.
Thank you very much. So that was a synthesis from Attorney Jacqueline Espanilla. She is an assistant professor from the UP College of Law and UP Institute for Maritime Affairs and Law of the Sea. So thank you, Attorney Jackie, for your very meaningful synthesis. I think a lot of us learned so many things today, so that was a good way for us to summarize our learnings and remember them. So right now, I'd like to just say that we will be playing a short video. So this video is from Sining Kabataan. This is a short film contest that accepts entries until November 5 this year. So let's play back this video from Sining Kabataan.
Awareness and influence. As we celebrate the 50th Fish Conservation Week and on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of USAID in the Philippines, BFAR and USAID Fish Right bring to you Sining Kabataan Short Film Contest, a creative competition open to all Filipinos, especially the youth, designed to create further awareness on the fight against IUU fishing, including the use of assessment and tracking tools such as iFit. If you missed BFAR and USAID's launch on the iFit tool, here is a quick refresher.
BFAR, together with USAID, has developed a set of tools to identify purposive, targeted, and effective responses against IUU fishing. The tools are packed into iFit, short for the Philippine IUU Fishing Index and Threat Assessment Toolkit. iFit is a suite of tools to guide and assess planning and action on IUU fishing in any given area within municipal waters. These tools work together like gears in a machine, interacting to set off a durable, virtuous chain of processes to reduce IUU fishing. iFit has been rolled out in several areas, and with its planned national rollout, we will be able to track IUU fishing over time, identify ways to work together to eliminate silos of data, and eventually have indicators that can tell us what is working and what isn't. Then it will become possible to redirect our focus and resources to those activities, areas, and factors that deliver positive outcomes, and finally put a stop to the tremendous damage that IUU fishing is inflicting on our fish stocks, marine biodiversity, vital ecosystems, and coastal communities. With iFit, we can fight IUU fishing better.
Come, imagine, be creative, and tell stories in a short film and contribute in protecting our Philippine fisheries from illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. As you help raise awareness and influence behavior change in protecting our oceans and fisheries from IUU fishing, your short film of 5 minutes or less will also give you a chance to win an iPad Pro and other gadgets. Take part in the push towards data-driven marine conservation and sustainable fisheries. Join Sining Kabataan now. Contest runs until November 5, 2021. For more information, visit the BFAR Central Office Facebook page and Kumusta Mangingisda Facebook page.
Our Fish, Our Life, and hashtag This is the Life. So thank you very much, everyone, and stay healthy.